Welcome to another episode of We Don't Die. I'm your host, Sandra Champlain, author of the international best-selling book called We Don't Die, A Skeptic's Discovery of Life After Death. Just a reminder, our home base is wedon'tdie.com, where you can always find great things, classes. We have a free Sunday gathering, inspirational service on Zoom every Sunday. We're in our 6th year now. It's crazy, but it's wonderful. Medium demonstration included and more. So let's get on to our guest today. It's a repeat guest and one of my favorite people. Our guest is Peter Alessandria, who is an award-winning photographer, filmmaker, author, TEDx speaker, and former entertainment attorney. His most recent project is a documentary film entitled Every Soul Knows: The Joy of Remembering Who We Really Are. It contains interviews with more than 60 thought leaders, including near-death experiencers, mediums, channels, and psychics. The film explores the idea that who we really are is so much more than our physical bodies and our personalities. You can find out more and watch the documentary film at everysoulknows.com. And be sure to go back to episode 395 when I first interviewed Peter. It's really great. And I know today will be great too, but there's so much more to this wonderful man. So, Peter, welcome back to We Don't Die.
Thank you, Sandra. Great to see you.
Great to see you too. You've been very busy since we last met.
Indeed.
Oh, my goodness. Now, there's people that are meeting you for the very first time. Would you be okay with just sharing a little bit about who you are, how you came into this world, kind of a little overview about what we talked about last time, why the world opened up of afterlife and that there's so much more to us. Tell us
Yeah,
about Peter.
I will. So thank you for the introduction. Thank you for the opportunity to speak and reconnect with your audience. So I'm originally from the New York City area. I grew up in a typical, I don't know what's typical anymore, but I had a pretty normal childhood. I went to college in upstate New York. I studied economics and business. I went to graduate school. I went to law school and business school. I got my law degree and my MBA. And after 4 years in Buffalo, New York, I decided to move to California. I wanted to get involved in the film business. So I moved to Los Angeles, moved my whole life out there, bought a one-way plane ticket, actually. Got a job in the film business, and I fell in love with the creative process. Up until that time, all I knew was the business and legal side of things, but I started meeting a lot of filmmakers and just became very enamored with the whole process. Eventually, I became an amateur filmmaker and photographer. And in 2009, I lost my law practice in the global financial crisis, decided to move my life back to the East Coast at that time and pursue a creative career full time. So I basically left the law behind and decided that I was going to be a creative professional in doing photography and filmmaking. As you may remember from last time, Sandra, or maybe not, the first few years didn't go so well. It turned out I had a very I was terrified to put myself out there as a creative person. You know, when it came to being a lawyer or a business person, I had that background. I could point to the credentials on the wall and all of that. But when it came to being a creative person, I had never taken and still haven't taken a photography class, a filmmaking class. I never even took an art appreciation class in college. And now I earn my living full time for almost 20 years now from being a creative professional. In 2019, let me back up. I've been a spiritual seeker probably for 35 years now. Now, what does that mean? Well, I wanted to know the answers to the bigger questions. You know, who are we? Where do we come from? And I guess most importantly, what happens after we leave this place? And so over the years, I've kind of informally studied many different spiritual traditions, more kind of metaphysics, all kinds of different things to educate myself and honestly to alleviate some of the suffering in my life. So I wanted these answers. I was on this quest. It all kind of came to a head in 2019 when my dad passed. I had been, up until that point, I can't say I was an atheist, but I was not I didn't have a firm grasp of the whole idea of spirituality and the afterlife. And so when my dad passed, right around that time, I read a novel called Adventures in the Afterlife, and it was written by a guy named William Buhlman. Now, the last time we spoke, had optioned that book, and I was working on the screenplay. My intention is to turn that into a feature film. And so while I was working on that, I started doing some research, and I started watching a lot of YouTube videos, including your podcast, your channel, educating myself on near-death experiences and other spiritually transformative experiences. And then 2020 rolled around, the pandemic rolled around, we were all kind of glued to our devices, and I really went down that rabbit hole, just really getting lost in the near-death experience. And it was very eye-opening for me. It was very transformational for me in a lot of ways, and it was kind of answering a lot of the questions that I had for all those years. 2022, so I was writing my own book at the time. I finished my book, and then I was working on the screenplay that I had optioned for the book that I had optioned, and I finished that. And one of the people that I reached, one of the people that I saw their interview on YouTube was a guy named Christian Sundberg. You might know Christian. And Christian has a pre-birth memory, and he shares his experiences online. And I reached out to him, and we had a Zoom set up, and just like this. And when we got on the call together, it just struck me that I have to do a documentary film about all of this. And that was it just kind of came into my head. And that was the beginning. And so I asked him if he would be interested, and I started reaching out to a bunch of other people, and that started the journey. This is like late 2022. And so I was finding people basically on YouTube, and if I resonated with their story, I'd reach out to them, get to know them a little bit, and then see if they wanted to be involved in the film. So 2.5 years later, I've interviewed over 70 or close to 70 people, 60-something people. People have come from all over the world, all over the US, all over Canada, from Europe. I even had one woman come from Bali to be part of the project. And I wanted to do it in person, in studio, so I wanted to meet everybody and have everybody in front of the camera. And it's just been an amazing journey, an amazing experience. Now, the plot twist in all of this is that in 2023, I was about halfway through the film, my younger brother passed. Completely unexpected. I hadn't seen him in a couple of years, and I felt called to go visit him. So I reached out. He was originally from New York, obviously where I am, but then he moved down to Florida. I went to see him, spent a week with him in Florida, and it was great. We had a I can't say we were ever estranged, but we weren't as close as we could have been, and that week was very healing, I think, for both of us. I'm really glad I went because 2 weeks later he passed. He had some health issues, but nothing imminent. And Sandra, that just threw me into I don't know how to describe it. I mean, I obviously people know when you lose somebody that it can be very painful, but this was beyond anything I had experienced in my life. And so I had this moment, and I was so distraught, and I was so filled with grief, and it was just sadness. I was just so sad, and I had some regrets about the relationship. And I ended up going back to Florida to help my sister with his estate. And for almost 3 months, I couldn't do much else but help her, and she was caught up in the grief. It was just very, very difficult for both of us. I really contemplated giving up on the film and giving up on pretty much everything in my life because I was so sad. I was so grief-stricken. But what happened was I came back to some of the interviews that I had recorded, and I started watching them, and I kind of inched my way back into the film, and it was actually working on the film that helped me move through all of that, to move through the grief. So this film has healed me, in a way that I don't know where I would be without it. So basically what happened was I started moving forward again, and a couple of interesting things came up. So number one is the film is dedicated to him, dedicated to my brother. And it's kind of, I almost can chuckle about it now because he was not a believer in the afterlife. And now he has a film dedicated to him that's all about the afterlife. What's interesting is that he's come through a bunch of times with mediums. So about half the people in the film are near-death experiencers, but the rest are a combination of channel psychics and mediums. So he's come through several times, and I know now that he's with me. I know that he's a part of this project, and I honestly believe that his passing was part of our soul's plan together. Because here's what happened. When he passed, it really forced me to decide how much I really believe all this stuff, right? Up until that point, I wanted to believe. It made sense. I guess, in my heart, I believed, but there was still a little bit of doubt there. And so when he passed, and I went through that whole process with the grief and moving through that, I come out on the other side now, and I know that there is an afterlife. I know that he's still with me. I know that all our loved ones are still with us. There's no doubt in my mind. And so it really forced me, because now I'm bringing a film to the world, and I'm telling the world there is no death, right? The body dies, but we're not our bodies. We are eternal spiritual beings. There's a lot of core messages from the film like that. And it really gave me that certainty that I may not have had at that point. Now, I want to say a couple of things. Number one is, no matter what you think you know about the afterlife, if you have those feelings, it's okay to feel that way. It's okay to have that grief. It's okay to have that sadness, because I had this intellectual understanding that life is eternal, but it still hurt like hell when he was gone, So the good news is I allowed myself to have those feelings, and I would encourage anybody to experience whatever you feel is okay. It's part of the process. And I tell people now, I say, look, we didn't come here to be spiritual. We're already that. We came here to be human and to have the human experience. And part of the human experience is dealing with grief and dealing with loss and coming through the other side. And you know what? However long it takes is how long it takes. There's no right way to deal with those feelings. It was helpful for me to have the support and to have had connections with people who have firsthand knowledge of what it's like on the other side, So I had that, and that was really, really helpful. And I'm hoping that this film will give people who may be in a similar situation, they've lost somebody, or maybe they have a diagnosis for themselves, they're faced with their own mortality. My hope is that this film, kind of like what you do, Sandra, will give people some comfort, give people some hope. And we really, my goal with the film is to present a really actual kind of glorious experience of the afterlife. The stories that people tell and the experiences that they have, it's pretty amazing, actually. So we kind of have a lot to look forward to here.
We absolutely do. Are there any particular stories with mediums that ring a bell that you really just got, yeah, my brother's here, that you want to share?
Well, let me start. So when I went down to Florida to visit, to help my sister with his estate, I was staying in his condo, and she lived somewhere else, so I was there alone. And again, I was so grief stricken, but I went to sleep one night, and it was one of the first nights I was there. And in the middle of the night, Sandra, there was this huge crash, right? It was something, it was just like this, and it woke me up, and it scared the crap out of me. It was really, I didn't know what had happened, right? And I was in a sound sleep. And so the next morning, I didn't want to get out of bed because I was afraid to get out of bed. I didn't know what was going on. So the next morning when I get up and I go downstairs, everything was fine. There was nothing, right? And I was thinking about it, and I remember right when I woke up, I heard this crash, and then I heard a little tiny laugh, right? Now, my brother and I, when we were younger, we always used to do things to scare each other. We would hide in the closet. We would jump out from behind the door, whatever we could do to get to shock the other one. And I think that was my brother. I think that's what he was that night. I think he was pulling a fast one, and that was a little game with him. So And then since then, I was actually with a medium when I got the news from my sister, and the medium said, you should, I was ignoring my phone. She said, you should really answer your phone. It's important. And she right away got a reading on him, what had happened and the whole thing. And then he's come through a bunch of other times. So, he's part of this. Even 5 years ago, if somebody told me this story, I would say you're crazy. But, now I'm a believer and now I get it. Now it makes sense to me, and there's been all kinds of stuff that I've done since, I've really kind of immersed myself in the whole idea of dimensions and frequencies and our journey as a soul, and so it all fits together. And actually, that picture makes a lot more sense than what I used to believe, to be honest with you. Now, there's one more little twist to all of this. So my mom, all right, my mom lives in New York, and she's seen the film a couple of times now. And she says, Peter, I love what you're doing. She said, you're doing such a great job, and you're so passionate, and the film looks great. She said, but you have to understand, I think this is all a big fairy tale. So she's not a believer, right? So at first, it was like, oh my God, I gotta convince her, right? I gotta convert her, and all of that. And then I just said, you know what? It's okay. She doesn't have to. She has her own experience, her own feelings, and what I realized, Sandra, is that I think for much of my life that was where I was at. Now I think when we're young, I mean, I didn't really think much about the afterlife. I was busy living my life and doing all the things that we do as human beings, and I probably had some vague idea, but I can't say I was a believer, in the way I am, certainly not in the way I am now. And so I related to her, but I think it goes beyond that in the sense that I think she's afraid to believe. Now, why do I say that? Well, and I think that might have been true for me as well. And I think it's because what if we believe and we're wrong? Or even worse, what if we believe and then what happens is what a lot of organized religions tell us happens if you're not good or whatever. So in a way, it's almost safer to not believe, So maybe that's why, I don't know. I can't speak for her, but that's kind of where I go with that. And so I'm not, and I start out the film, the introduction to the film. I say, look, don't take anybody's word for anything. Listen to what everybody has to say, but ultimately you're going to have to decide for yourself. And I actually stop the film 3 times, and we do a 2-minute guided meditation. And I say to the audience, look, you've heard what everybody else has to say about this. Now, what's your truth? And so I really want people to come away with their own inner wisdom, their own highest truth about all of this. Because, again, ultimately, that's what really matters, And if other people see it differently, that's okay.
Your mom and my mom are probably around the same age. And I know my mom has been the same as your mom. No matter how many interviews I've done and everything, every so often, when you die, right? Like that would come out. But I always said, when I have a great interview, can I share with you? Absolutely, absolutely. And it's really cool because I never push. I always ask because there's people I want to share, like you and others. And so all of these things have just been kind of seeping into her system. And of course, we do a drive or do something, and we have all these psychic moments, right? Like I recognize them, and she's like, how does that happen? How does that happen? And I thought, well, I think there's more to life than meets the eye, Mom. And then she's come right out and said that when she grew up, this was not a thing to believe in. And she also said, if I was ever at a medium demonstration and one of my parents came through, she says, I don't know how I would behave. So there's fear there. But inch by inch, every human being, I think, inside, has that faith or ask those questions. And sometimes it's easier to just, be like our moms, but we love them. We love them. And as far as what every soul knows and your intermissions and your meditations and all that, we are never, well, first of all, I'm going to say, I don't think there is one truth. I think there's our truth. And I think as human beings, we get to discover it. So like, I love that you start the film that way, because what resonates with you, yeah, take it. And if it doesn't, fine. but we each need our own path to follow and those things that give us life and give us our values and our beliefs and everything. But you present so many different topics and so many different voices. I'm getting goosebumps now just thinking of it all. I mean, it's a 2.5 hour film with a lot of substance. Would you share some of the different questions that you open up? I mean, you start right out with, what is a soul? There's big topics and great stories of near-death experiences and stuff. Take us on a little
Well,
tour of what every soul knows.
yeah, Will, thank you. So let me tell you a little bit more about the genesis then of the project, because what happened was when I started on this journey, I wanted to be really respectful of people's stories. I didn't want to sensationalize the death experiences. And sometimes I see that, not always, but sometimes I see that in the way some interviews are done. And I almost feel it can be a distraction. So what I'm talking about is the car accident, the botched surgery, the illness or whatever. And so I had this idea, instead of having people tell their stories, I was going to have my list of questions, and I was going to ask everybody the same questions. And these are the questions that I think many people have, like, what is the soul? Are there contracts or agreements between souls? Do we have guardian angels? Are there spirit guides? Are there soul contracts? Are there agreements between souls? What is karma? Are we judged or punished for our mistakes in the afterlife? There's more than 30, there's about 36 questions. If you go to the website, everysoulknows.com, there's a whole list, all the questions are listed out there. And what I did was, the first 40 people that I interviewed, I didn't let any of them tell their stories, right? Instead, we went through these questions. And a couple of them were kind of confused. They're like, well, when do I tell my story? I said, we're not doing stories. Now, eventually I changed that, and I'll talk about that in a second. But what happened was, the first 40 people, none of them knew who else was in the film. None of them knew what anybody else's answers were to those questions. But when you watch the film, it's like they fit together like puzzle pieces. It's almost like they finish each other's sentences. And this took place over 2 years, different locations. Again, nobody knew what anybody else's answers were, and yet it fits together. I'm going to show a clip in a minute. It fits together like a glove. Then maybe about a little over a year ago, I realized, there is value in telling the stories, right? Stories are transformational. So I went back to some people and I found a bunch of new people and I said, okay, we're going to tell your story, but you only get 5 minutes to talk about the car accident or, whatever. And then because what I really want to know is, what did you learn from the experience? And how can we take what you learned and make our lives better while we still think we're here in the physical, right? The basic premise of the film is, until we know who we really are, not much is going to change in this world. In an odd way, this world makes sense if who we are these physical bodies that have a limited lifespan, that have to fight with other bodies over resources and everything else. It's not a very happy life for many of us. The planet is a mess, right? But it kind of makes sense. But what if that's not who we are? What if we're not these bodies? What if life is actually eternal? And what if we come here by choice, right? One of the questions I asked the interviewees, are human incarnations voluntarily chosen? And everybody, unanimously, everybody said, nobody's here against their will. Everybody chose to be here. And not only did we choose to be here, but we came with a purpose. There's something that we wanted to accomplish for our benefit, but also for the benefit of others, because we plan our lives with groups, in our soul groups. So another website I'm going to ask people to take a look at is itstimetoremember.org. It's a nonprofit that I set up, and it has key messages from the film, the 7 key messages from the film there. And I'm not asking for donations. There's no subscriptions, nothing. All I ask is that if you resonate with those messages, find a way to share them. And so these key messages are things like, there is no death. Life is eternal. We're all united. We're all one. We're part of a greater whole. We were created by love, as love, and for love. So it's kind of changing our ideas about ourselves. If you remember last time we spoke and I talked about my book, the basic premise of my book is the most important question we can ask is, who do you think you are? Who do I think I am? Right? This is a question that, spiritual teachers have been telling us forever. Ask, who are you? Who am I? So if we're not these bodies, what are we? And one of the things that I've been studying for many years is Course in Miracles. Course in Miracles says right up front, I'm not a body. I am free, for I am still as God created me. And my favorite workbook lesson is, I am spirit. And so having worked with all these people now and all the stuff that I've done on my own, the studying and all that, I firmly believe that we are spirit. We are these souls. We come in by choice to have a human experience because we come to this particular plane for the duality, polarity, the challenges, and our soul has an opportunity to grow by experiencing these things. And so we're here by choice. We're here to accomplish something, and it ultimately involves the evolution, the growth of our soul. Now, many people say, well, the soul is perfect. Why does it have to grow? It doesn't have to do anything. We're doing this by choice. Why does somebody climb Mount Everest? You don't have to climb Mount Everest, right? But people choose to do it all the time. Why do people go on vacation? You don't have to go on vacation, but you choose to do that. Why? For the adventure, for the experience. That's exactly why we're here, for the adventure and the experience. So it's kind of shifted my whole view of who I am and why I'm here and what's going on here. And I hope the film will do the same for others.
Fantastic. You want to play the clip?
Play the clip.
Play the clip. And then those of you who are listening, you'll hear the clip, obviously, but you can go over to YouTube and watch this episode and watch the clip. Or even better yet, you can go to whateverysoulknows.com and you can see the film. Happy to report it's playing in some theaters as well, and you can get it at home.
I'm not afraid to die. I just don't want to be there when it happens. Woody Allen.
What is death?
I believe that death is actually the greatest experience that a human will ever have.
Death is an absolutely amazing thing. I was dead for well over 30 minutes for sure, maybe even an hour and a half. It's just the process that we go through to go home.
Death is an absurdity that is just as ridiculous as the notion of birth in the first place.
Death is essentially walking from one room of a house into another. You're walking from the room that is the Earth School, and you're walking into the room that is the non-physical realm we call home.
Death is the rebirth of the soul. They say that dying is like taking off a tight shoe that has been killing you all day.
More times than I can count, I have taken so many people through different experiences of learning how to connect to their loved ones on the other side. And I can tell you there is no death.
When we die, we wake up back into our natural soul spirit state and remember, oh, this is who I really am. No matter how real that seemed, that was the dream I was having for a certain purpose.
Death is just a change of form, of frequency, of energy. When our time in this body is done, we expand, we move on.
I've had a near-death experience and have been able to look at death right in its eyes. And I can tell you that from a human perspective, death is real. But from a spiritual perspective, there is no death. The soul will go on far beyond this body.
That was one of the messages I was sent back with. Go back and tell them, life is eternal. There is no death.
But meanwhile, that soul that animated the body still exists. And the role the soul was playing as you and as I continues across the veil, but without a body.
So it's nothing to be afraid of. After death, actually, spirit feels very calm and relaxing and happy and free.
So death is a doorway from one dimension into another. Many people believe that when they pass through death's door, that there's some sort of change in energy. Well, there's not. There's a saying like, wherever you go, there you are, even to the other side.
In the ICU, I have the opportunity to see a lot of death. I can feel many times when a patient makes their transition that on the other end, there's a great sense of release. Death for the one dying and for those around them is an opportunity to remember that we are so much more, and that which we are continues forever.
So death in the soul perspective is going back home, reviewing the life that you just had, and getting your credit for all of the classes that you passed this time around on Earth School. In my own near-death-like experience, it was as if I had woken up from a dream, and it was this great feeling of joy and freedom and release, and there was no bondage from my past with me.
It is not a final end. I have experienced it for myself. I have direct personal knowledge that your self within you moves on.
When we transition, our spirit guides try to make it as comfortable for us as possible. So people who believe in the pearly gates or something like that will have that sort of set up for them to experience. And I think most people find, from my experience in communicating with the other side, that it's delightful.
I've seen many Eastern cultures where death is just a part of life, because there's an understanding that there's a continuation of consciousness. In the Western culture, we seem to have locked that in under religious beliefs that when we die, we go to heaven or we go to hell. What I've seen so far is there are multiple heavens and multiple hells. Each relate to what you believe in.
Now, I will also say, as a near-death survivor, that where you go is largely dependent on your consciousness at the time. What eventually happened to me in my near-death experience is I went into the etheric realms, and I went into a place where I would have probably been stuck as a ghost for many, many years. So you get to choose with your consciousness how you complete this life.
What we leave behind is this physical dead body, and we're reborn into a conscious life that is the real, true life, our true home. When you transition over and you have the ability to look back, it's almost as though it was dull and dead all along. What you transition to is pure joy. The feeling of life is indescribable. It's as though you truly have been reborn.
In 1994, Tony Cicoria, a surgeon and medical doctor, was struck by lightning during a family outing. During his near-death experience, Tony discovered that there is no death and that the soul continues after the loss of the body.
I was out at the barbecue doing my job, and I remembered that I hadn't called my mother that day, who was quite elderly. I walked around the building, and there was a payphone on the other side. And I, put in her number and let it ring 5 or 6 times, and she never picked up. And so I said, well, I'll try again later. What I was not aware of is that a huge thunderhead had formed over the lake. When I had the phone next to my ear and I started to take it away to hang it up, suddenly I saw this huge flash of light comes out of the phone and hits me in the face, and I hear this incredibly loud crack. And it just threw me back like a rag doll. I went flying backwards. And a strange thing happened. I knew I had been hit by lightning, and I knew I'd been thrown backwards, but suddenly I had this strange sensation of moving forwards. And I remember going, I don't understand. I know I got hit. I know I got thrown back. And so why am I standing here wondering what just happened? All of a sudden, I hear my mother-in-law screaming, and she's at the top of the stairs. I'm at the bottom. She starts running down the stairs right at me, and I thought, this can't be good. When your mother-in-law is screaming and running at you, something bad's going to happen. As she was coming down the stairs, I realized that she's not looking at me. She's looking off to her left. As she gets down to right where I was, it was like I didn't exist. And she just took off to her left. And I thought, I'm going to follow her. I went probably 3 or 4 steps, And all of a sudden, I was confronted with myself on the ground. And I remember looking down at this body, and I thought, oh shit, I'm dead. And I remember that my mind was racing like crazy at the time. And I thought when you died, there'd be some bells and whistles or something would give you a clue that you were dead, but I had nothing. It was absolutely seamless. So here I am standing there. I'm right at the head of this body, and I'm looking down and realizing that I'm dead. I'm not in that body. And I get this sudden realization that, Jesus, I'm thinking just like I normally would. I'm thinking in the same vernacular that I would normally think. And it came to me that whoever I am, I always am. And this body is nothing but an empty shell that my spirit spent some time in. There was a woman who was standing behind me waiting to use the phone. It turns out that she was a nurse. She starts doing CPR and everybody's crowding around. And at this point, I'm thinking, well, there's no point in standing here. And so I turned around and walked away. And I walked over to the stairs and I started going up the stairs. And I get to about the third step. All of a sudden, I realize that my legs are starting to dissolve. And I thought, holy crap, what is happening? And as I was going up the stairs, my form dissolved. I was nothing more than a ball of energy. By the time I got to the top of the stairs, that's all I was. And at that point, I thought, well, the stairs go off to the left. And then I said, the heck with this. I just went right through the wall. When I got through the other side of that wall, my wife was sitting on a chair and she was painting children's faces. She had no idea what had happened. And I made a specific note to myself of who the kids were and what position they were in. It would turn out to be an important factor later on when it came time to check notes and see what I really witnessed, that there was no possible way for me to have witnessed. And I continued. And I went diagonally through that room, and I had the realization that, my family would be fine without me. And I went through the roof, and things really started to change at that point. Suddenly, I'm falling into a river of pure positive energy. It was the most unbelievable thing I've ever felt. If you could imagine absolute love and absolute peace, that's all you felt in this energy. And the energy went through everything and actually composed everything. As I was feeling this and came to this realization, this is the greatest thing that could ever happen to somebody. So this river of pure positive energy is carrying me someplace, and I didn't care where it was going because it felt so amazingly great. I remember thinking, this must be the God energy. And I realized that we're all part of this same energy force, and we are all connected. So I'm floating in this river of pure positive energy, and I was resigned to the fact that I was not going to see my family again. I was off on a new adventure. I reached a point where I'm ecstatic about where it's taking me. And all of a sudden, boom, I was back in my body. It was like somebody had flipped a switch, and I was pissed. I remember lying there going, no, I don't want to come back. Don't make me do this. I loved where I was going. I want to complete that. But I was back. The lady who had been doing CPR had stopped, and she was just kneeling next to me. I looked at her and I said, it's okay, I'm a doctor. She just laughed and said, you weren't a minute ago. I was embarrassed, and so I just kept my mouth shut. At this point, the police came and they called an ambulance, and I refused to go to the hospital because as a physician, I know what going to the emergency room is going to mean. I'm going to sit there for hours and hours, and they're going to tell me, yeah, you're alive, go home. So the big lesson there is there is no death, and your spirit continues on and is everlasting. When we die, it's just a change. It's a phase change. We enter into a different state, but our spirit lives on. To know that there is something else that occurs after death, and to know that there is a force of absolute love and peace that underlies everything and makes up everything, is the greatest gift that anyone could ever give me.
Thanks so much for sharing that. Now, do you want to tell us the reason you played that piano music behind Dr. Cicoria?
So some of you may know, some of you may not know Tony's story. Great guy, by the way. And you know, Tony took over a year to arrange that interview. So a bunch of people in the film, there was a lot of moving pieces, you know, to get people in front. It's one thing to do things on a webcam, but to get people in the same room. So we finally made it work. Tony came back from his near-death experience. And here's the other thing. Let me just mention this real quick. So the film, right now, the preview is over 2 hours long, but I actually have about 6 hours of content. So I don't know if it's going to be a 3-part film. It's going to be a series of 1-hour things. I don't know what I'm going to do with it, but I have so much great content. I have over 100 hours of interviews. So what I've done, though, is even though it's 6 hours, you know, most people are only going to get a few minutes on camera. You can't hear the whole story. So I want to let people know in the audience that right now, today, you can go to the website or the YouTube channel. The film's YouTube channel is at Every Soul Knows, and everybody's full interview is available. So you can see Tony's entire interview. It runs almost an hour long. You hear his whole story, and it's available for free. There's no subscription. There's no nothing on both the website, the film website, and the YouTube channel. I even cut out the mid-roll ads, so you can watch the whole thing uninterrupted. And that's been a wonderful. I wanted to honor the people who honored me by traveling all this way to be, you know, and so I wanted everybody's voice to be heard. I also wanted to create like a reference library for the audience. So what's happening is there's over 60 interviews now. So people are binge watching all the interviews from the film on the YouTube channel. And every morning I wake up and there's just these wonderful comments, you know, in my inbox. People are so grateful. So Tony's story is pretty incredible. I mean, not only is the guy hit by lightning, but when he comes back, he finds out that he has a talent, a gift, a proclivity for piano, for classical piano. And he had, when he was like 7 years old, I think he had like a year of lessons, but he never pursued it. He hadn't played in years. It wasn't even on his mind. And when he came back from his near-death experience, he had this piece of music in his head. And he had to learn as an adult. He had to learn how to play the piano. And then he kind of, he put on a bunch of concerts. He still performs, and he's written his own music. So he became, you know, people come back from the near-death experience changed in many ways. And often they come back with gifts, some kind of psychic gifts. But in his case, it was an actual talent, a musical talent that he didn't know he had.
I love that story. I love it. It's so nice to hear different people. And like you said, you didn't know what they were going to say. And like a jigsaw puzzle, they just went together. What every soul knows is that truth of who we are and why we're here. And so, yeah, we might all have different perspectives of it and little different tweaks to it, but the foundation is the same. And you've got some good people in there. Many I didn't know, and many I do. And I was so delighted to see Dr. Eben Alexander there and Anita Morjani on it. I mean, fantastic stories of healing after a near-death experience, you know? So well done. And I love that you have got the YouTube channel and everybody can watch all those films. Thank you.
You can go there right now. It's all available. And it was really important to me, Sandra, that I wanted to give new people a chance. So about half the people in the film you've seen, but about half of them you haven't seen. And I really wanted to give new people a chance to shine. So I'm honored that people like Eben and Anita, you know, and Jeff Olson, people like that said yes. But it was also really important for me to have new voices and new faces. So you have a mix of that.
How do we create heaven on earth while we're here? There's a question for you.
Well, I actually asked that question, where is heaven? And in the film, here's my take on it. So heaven it's not a place or a destination. It's literally just a frequency away, right? And that is the frequency of love, the frequency of compassion, the frequency of forgiveness. And so we can create heaven right here on earth. That's the promise of the Bible, for instance, and many of the spiritual texts, but we never knew how to get there. So for me, it comes through this recognition that, again, I say that, we're not who we think we are. And what's going on here is not what we think is going on. And once we know that and embrace that, then we can start living in a whole new way. And when we live in a whole new way, that's usually based on this idea of oneness, this idea of unity, this idea of unconditional love, forgiveness. My TEDx talk is on forgiveness. The longest chapter in my book is on forgiveness. And that seems to be one of my soul lessons in this lifetime, is working through forgiveness. These are the ways that we create heaven on earth. Again, we don't have to go to some distant realm or location. So but it starts with this awareness. As long as I think I'm this body, again, that has so many, a limited lifespan and, is subject to all the ills of the world and all the challenges, it's very hard to live from that place of oneness, of compassion, of unity, and of unconditional love. But once I begin to change that idea about myself, see myself differently, and by the way, see everybody else differently, now we can create heaven on earth.
True words. And it all starts with ourselves, the forgiveness, the self-love, all of that. And then through that lens, see other people. It sounds so simple, yet, it's difficult. I mean, it doesn't have to be, but just to have the reminder that we are so much more, so much more. I've had 2 mothers email me this morning that their adult child, has ended their own life. What are the words about the topic of suicide from the film?
So we do have 2 people in the film who discuss the experience of a loved one taking their own life. One is Michelle Clare. She's a psychic medium. And the other is Paul Arand. Paul is associated with the Michael Newton Institute. He's a regression therapist. And he lost his son to suicide, and Michelle lost her boyfriend, her fiance, to suicide. And the good news is, nobody's cast out of heaven. They're not denied in any way the experience that any of us will have when we pass. They are met with love, acceptance, compassion, and in many ways, they're helped. See, here's the thing. When you cross over, you almost immediately see things that you didn't see while you were here in this body. And it becomes apparent, in most cases, I think it becomes apparent that taking our own life is not a solution. It's not a way to solve anything. So you have that awareness when you cross over from suicide, and then you're met with guides, with angels, with your family, loved ones, and you're given a chance to reevaluate your choice, and to see how you might have had a chance, how you might have handled things differently. And many people take advantage of that, and they actually will come back and do it again. They'll have another experience of that lifetime, and they'll make a new choice. So, but the biggest message is nobody is cast out of heaven. There's nobody who's punished for making that decision. It's simply a mistake. And what I was going to say earlier, I forgot to mention 2 things. So one is there's this thing called the veil of forgetting. The veil of forgetting is we come into this life, this physical life, and we completely forget who and what we really are, right? But we do that by choice. And we know that that's going to happen because what that does is it makes this earthly experience real and meaningful. If we came here and knew everything about our past lives, we knew everything about heaven, who we really are as soul, as spirit, it would almost be like knowing all the answers to the final exam, right? at first, it would kind of be fun, probably, but eventually it would make the exam meaningless. There would be no point in taking the exam. So it's similar to this earthly experience, but part of the forgetting is that we forget things like what happens when we make a choice to take our own life, you know? So that veil of forgetting is important. And what we're doing now by awakening to who and what we really are is we're beginning to move through that veil. It's becoming thinner. The other thing I want to mention real quick before I forget is last night or yesterday was my 11-year-old niece's dance recital. So she belongs to a dance school, and she has some challenges. She actually has a mild case of cerebral palsy, and my sister has worked with this kid, and you almost would not know that she had any kind of a disability. And this kid and all the other kids, so there was probably about 40 or 50 kids, their range of age from maybe age 6 to age 16, and they get up in groups and they perform on stage. And especially the younger ones, you know, they kind of lack coordination, and they're trying so hard. You know, they're up there and they're trying so hard to do their dance and keep up with all the other people in the group and to remember everything. And there's somebody in front of the stage, especially for the young kids. There's one of the teachers, and she's showing everybody what the moves are, you know, to help them along. And then you have an auditorium filled with probably 300 people, family and friends of these kids, and the parents and the families are everybody's cheering and clapping, and they're just so supportive of these kids. You know, even when they make a mistake, you know, they get a round of applause, and it's like there's so much love and support. So two things come from that. So number one is I think you and I and everybody else are those kids on the stage when it comes to this soul experience. We don't really fit in here, and it's kind of awkward, and it's hard to negotiate the physical plane. You know, we talk about how we hear from the near-death experiences how it's so limiting and it's so dense, you know. And it's the opposite of what we experience on the other side, which is freedom and unlimitedness and power and all of that. And then, so we're kind of the kids on the stage, and our soul families, our guardian angels, our soul guides, they're the ones in the audience cheering us on, right? They're just there to support us and to love us. And it doesn't matter what we do, they're still going to love us, right? And they're still going to support us, and they're still going to be there for us. And so I cried during this dance recital because I really got, wow, you know, what if that's what it's really like? You know, what if we do, because we hear all the time that we have this whole team with us of angels and guides and loved ones, and they're all rooting for us, right? And because they know how hard it is here, you know, and they all want us to succeed, and they love us unconditionally. And again, we're like those kids. So have a little compassion for yourself and everybody else, have a little understanding, some forgiveness, you know, and you know, the purpose of being here is to give and receive love, to give and receive that unconditional love. And we have to start with ourselves. So even when you make a mistake on that stage of life, find that love for yourself, find that forgiveness, right? And that changes everything.
That's beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. Tell us again the website, what we can find there. I know people are going to be watching this, you know, 5 years into the future. So you don't have to give dates of where places are, but you've got some cinemas that are airing it as well. And we can always find the film online to watch.
Yeah, so there is a preview online right now, and the website is everysoulknows.com, 3 words. And you'll see on the front page, I have so I'm taking the film on the road. So I'm going from Connecticut down to Maryland and Virginia to North Carolina and down to Atlanta. I'm driving. So I have all these screenings set up. We've done a couple of screenings. There's a screening in Connecticut next week, and we've done a screening on Long Island, New Jersey. Actually did a screening in Ireland back in November. And one of the cool things about the screenings is if you can attend an in-person screening, is after every screening, we're doing an audience Q&A. So, for instance, in New Jersey, I had about 10 people from the film came to the screening, and when the film was finished, they came down to the front of the theater, and pretty much everybody in the audience stayed, and they started asking questions. And that's really meaningful for me. I really want people to have a chance to get their questions answered. I'm kind of calling this film Afterlife 101. So this is for people who may never have heard of a near-death experience, or maybe they've heard of a near-death experience, but they never heard of the life review, or they don't know about soul contracts or soul families. So I really want to have a way for people to get their questions answered. So that's been a wonderful part of the process of the live screenings. Again, if you can't make it to an in-person event, there is the online screening, and eventually the film will be available. Hopefully it'll be widely available on places like Netflix, Amazon, the whole thing. So, but I haven't even finished. I'm still editing. I haven't finished the film yet. So when the film is finally finished, it'll be widely available. And just check out the website. You can subscribe. I do a monthly newsletter, so I keep everybody up to date on what's happening with the film.
So exciting. Oh my gosh. So someday you're going to be, well, we both will be, I don't want to say nearing the end of our life, but be old people looking back. What is it about the film that just really keeps you going? Like for me right now, I can't get enough of hearing about the deathbed visitations and that nobody dies alone, right? Is there something from the film or from your interviews that you just hold on to that's like your truth?
Well, so the last question I ask in the film is, what does our soul want us to know? And again, there's like 30 people, they all said the same thing. Our soul wants us to know that we're loved, that we're valuable, that we're worthy, right? That we deserve love, that we're good enough, right? And that, God is incomplete without us. There's a workbook lesson in Course in Miracles, God is incomplete without me. So we all make up this greater whole. We're all part of that, and we're all equally important. We're all equally valuable, and we're all equally loved and lovable. And so to me, that changes everything. Because when I love myself, now I can love others. And when I love others, now we have a whole different world.
You brought up God. There's all kinds of views of God. Was there a common theme that went through when you interviewed the folks?
So another question I ask in the movie is, what is God and where is God? The general consensus on that is just look in the mirror, if you want to see where God is, right? Because we are all a fractal, a spark of the divine, a fractal of God. We are God in human form. We are God experiencing itself. And I've only had one, what I would call spiritually transformative experience in my life. In 2001, I went to a Neale Donald Walsch retreat. Neale Donald Walsch wrote Conversations with God books, the whole series. We did a retreat there. And I did a lot of forgiveness work during that retreat. And I had this amazing meditation experience, a Kundalini type experience where I just felt all this energy come up, rush through my body, out the top of my head. And I had this profound feeling of oneness with everyone and everything and peace. And so after that experience, I came back to the workshop because we all kind of went off on our own to meditate. I came back to the dining hall, and all I wanted to do was look in everybody's eyes. I just wanted to connect with them, to feel that love, that oneness. And which kind of freaked a few people out until I explained what was going on with me. But Sandra, it was the first time in my life that I didn't have any fear. It was completely just totally at peace. So what happened was 2 days later when the workshop ended, I was leaving. I was walking out of the workshop to go to the bus, dragging my luggage behind me on this gravel path. And I just had this moment of gratitude. I felt so grateful, right, for everything that I had experienced that week. And in my mind, I just said, God, thank you so much. Thank you. I'm so grateful. A moment later, I heard in my mind, and I still get chills just talking about this, I heard very clearly, thank you, Peter, for allowing me to experience life through you. And it took my breath away. And I was with a bunch of people, and I had to stop and lean against this tree. I thought I was going to collapse. I mean, it was just this thing. And they all looked at me like, are you okay? And I think that explains our relationship with God. God is us experiencing itself through us in this physical experience, in the 3D. And the analogy I give is, in heaven, we read the book on riding the bicycle, but in the earth plane, in the 3D, in the physical, not only do we ride the bike, but we fall off the bike and scrape our knees. And not only do we fall off and scrape our knees, but our friends laugh at us. That's the experience that the soul has, which we can't have in heaven. It's that polarity, that duality. And it's in that moment, for instance, when I fall off the bike and scrape my knees and my friends are laughing at me, I have an opportunity to love myself, to forgive myself for making that mistake, right? Or do I choose to feel bad about myself? Do I choose to get angry and push them off their bike? See, that's why we're here, guys. It's that moment, that choice point. Do I choose to be who I really am, which is love, compassion, goodness, forgiveness, right? And there's no right or wrong. Nobody's judged. We hear that all the time in the life review. Nobody's judged for the choices that they make, right? But that's why we're here, to know ourselves and our own experience as what? As what we are. Love, unconditional love, goodness, compassion. That's why we're here.
Thank you so much. Now, is there a resource through what every soul knows to get back to you, your book, your TEDx talk, any of that? Or
So the best thing to do, the website for my book is bebiggertoday.com. I'll give Sandra a link. She could put it in the description. And the title of the book is Be Bigger Than You Think You Are. It's a personal development book, but I talk a lot about my spiritual journey. I talk a lot about forgiveness, as well as some very practical things, relationship stuff and manifesting, creating the life that you want to have. All you have to do is Google my name and it should come up. You'll see it.
Perfect. Yeah. And your TED Talk was just great. That's how we met. I saw that first and it's like, I got to talk to this guy. And here we are. You've been a guest speaker on our Sunday gathering and friends for eternity. Peter, thank you so much for being our guest here today.
Thank you, Sandra, for having me, and thank you for all that you do. I mean, you have been a trailblazer in this field for years now, right? And really paving the way and making, I think, we are all part of this awakening, this ascendance, right? And it is this message of oneness, of love, of unity, of forgiveness, and so I want to thank you for all your hard work. I know it hasn't been easy. And you're still in the game, which is great. So thank you for what you do.
You are most welcome. I am in the game between this show where I strictly do interviews, and then I have segments and different topics within episodes of my Shades of the Afterlife podcast. I'm now over 730 hours of episodes, 730 unique episodes. It's insane. And this is the girl who never believed in any of this. So, folks, this just goes to show there's a ripple effect. And if you share, when you share, you never know whose soul you're going to just light up and they're going to feel that truth. So be sure to go to everysoulknows.com. And what was the other website you mentioned, the nonprofit?
So it's timetoremember.org. So there is a link at the bottom of the homepage of everysoulknows.com to that. And again, my dream is to be one day, again, I don't want your money, I don't want anything other than if you resonate with those messages, share them. And my dream is to be driving down a highway somewhere in the middle of nowhere and to come upon a billboard with those 7 messages.
I love it. Let's make that happen. It's all possible. Wow. Well, thank you to Peter, and also thank you to you, our listener or our viewer. As a reminder, my home base is wedon'tdie.com. I'll give you everything I have. All episodes are there. Also, if you scroll to the bottom of the page and you enter your name and email address in my email list, it says you get the first few chapters of my book. The truth is, it's the entire book. Chapter 10 is How to Survive Grief, which I think is something that many of us deal with when a loved one passes, and so much more. Join us for one of our free Sunday gatherings. They're inspiring, they're empowering, and there's a medium demonstration included, held on Zoom at 2 p.m. New York time every single Sunday. We're in our 6th year now. We get 150 to 200 people every week, and it's just a great community. So everything you can find and more at wedon'tdie.com. So in closing, I'm Sandra Champlain. I'm so delighted that I get to have these extraordinary conversations with extraordinary people and be your host here on We Don't Die. I do believe that life is an education for the soul and that your life here on earth is so important. We can keep it simple. We can look through the eyes of love and forgiveness, starting with ourselves and others, sprinkle a little gratitude in there, and we just can't go wrong. All right. Your soul loves you. We've got a whole team around us that love us, and I love you too. So thank you for listening or for watching, and we'll see you again soon.